Hello and welcome to Dicey Encounters. Today we are going to talk about failing up in tabletop role-playing games. So failing is a part of role-playing games. It's quite a significant part actually, because if you take away all those times when you actually succeed in what you do, because that's not actually the majority of the time. The majority of the time when you first start is going to be failing a role, it's going to be not getting to do what you want. And so good role-playing games have a way of addressing how you deal with that failure. Not every single failed roll to hit needs to be a massive swing and complete miss, and that's it. Not every natural one has to be a sword leaving your hand and embedding itself in your party member. And there are some cool role-playing systems that do incorporate that. If you look at Powered by the Apocalypse games, they have the whole, if you roll 7 to 9, it's a mixed success, which means it's not quite a failure, but it's kind of a mixed result. Blades in the Dark does this a lot as well. 4s and 5s are mixed successes. And even in the book, there's a great chapter called Player Best Practices. And in that, it says, learn to embrace the 4s and the 5s, not just the 6s. After all, if your character did everything perfectly, it'd be pretty boring. So I'm going to go through like 3 points. Each one I've kind of got from, mostly from the Blades in the Dark book, actually, and sort of bits around there. And this is a way that you can kind of incorporate these sort of rules and this kind of play into maybe something like D&D, so that when your players are getting a bit annoyed that one bad roll has messed up their entire quest or what they're doing, you can maybe remember these tips and spruce it up a little bit. So my first tip for failing up is don't make your players look incompetent. And when I say players, I actually mean characters. Don't let the players' characters look incompetent. There's this huge meme where it's like, a natural 1 means that there's a sort of a catastrophic, humiliating failure and mistake. But a natural 1 is 1 out of 20 things that you do. That'd be like every 20th step you fall flat on your face. So it doesn't really work like that. A natural 1 just means that you automatically fail, regardless of any modifier. But instead of making it humiliating for your player characters, why not just make it an external factor why they failed so badly? Instead of having a natural 1 on a persuasion roll, it doesn't have to be that the character, dribbled or something. It could be that the person they're trying to charm is just incredibly resilient. Maybe they've had someone else try and persuade them just earlier that day. Maybe a drunk collapses in between the two of you and completely messes up your whole spiel. There are loads and loads of reasons, external reasons, why at this point in time your character failed that roll. And in a fight, if you get a natural 1, maybe it's because the thing you're fighting, maybe they're having the best day of their life, maybe they're having the best fight they've ever had, maybe they're just on a roll. Make the players' 1s turn into the enemy's jubilation and success. And you can carry that failure forward. You can make it have sort of narrative consequences rather than immediate reactional consequences. So rolling a 1 to track a nature check to track a monster doesn't necessarily mean that, you've not tracked him, that's it, you've lost it. Now what do you do? A 1 could be that the monster has a way of covering its tracks, or it knows that the players are there, or something like this, something that's unexpected. They're not going to notice that failure right then. They're not being punished for it then, but it will make it a bit more difficult later on. But it's not making it impossible now. At the end of the day, like player characters, they're supposed to be above average at what they do, right? If someone with -3 intelligence tries to remember some knowledge, you can have a bit of a giggle and make it seem a bit silly. But if it's like a fighter with his +7 to hit sword, like getting a natural 1 is just not going to happen. Or you could get one of those like critical hit sheets where you roll a d100, so even if you do get a 1, there's only a 10% chance that you're going to be catastrophic enough to actually do any damage to yourself or someone else. My second tip for failing up is introduce the Devil's Bargain. This is another Blades in the Dark mechanic, and I just realised this probably should have been a things to steal from video, because that's all I'm doing. Devil's Bargain is something that the DM can offer the player. And what I like about Blades in the Dark is that it has mechanics that are driving the players towards that narratively intense, suspenseful, exciting plots. So a Devil's Bargain is if the players want to do something and it seems pretty impossible or they've failed to do it, a Devil's Bargain is something the DM can actually just say, I will let you succeed, but because, we all have that moment where there's a really cool thing that we want to do, that, it'd be so amazing if it happened, but the DC is going to be like 18 and it's going to be pretty small chance of success, and it's just going to, pop like a balloon and not be that cool. But what if there was a way that you could actually do that thing and then maybe pay for it later, or pay for it in a different way? And try and keep in mind as well, if you're a DM, that your players will leave the session thinking of all the twists and turns as actually really fun. And if you're a player thinking, well, I don't want the game to be like harder, it's a game about problem solving and overcoming challenges. So, that's the whole point. A typical Devil's Bargain would have been, Luke and Leia and Han and Chewie are in the Death Star and they're trapped in this corridor with the stormtroopers shooting at them, and they're in basically ducks in a barrel. Not for stormtroopers, but whatever. And the DM says, well, Devil's Bargain, there is a trash chute there which you can get in if you shoot the grill. And the players say, yeah, okay, we'll take it. And then they jump down, and then, oh, it's a fucking trash compactor. That's a cool moment, right? That's a really popular, famous moment from Star Wars. Everyone remembers it because it's escalating that drama. It's going from, frying pan to fire, but there's a reason why people jump into the fire out of a frying pan. One D&D example that I thought of was, imagine your players are sneaking through a castle and one of the players fails their stealth check and a guard spots them. So the player says, I'm going to try and persuade or intimidate the guard to not raise the alarm. And you say, well, it's a guard and their job is to guard. You're going to need a lot more than just your wits to convince them to not raise the alarm, right? So you say, this could be a DC 18, you're going to need a pretty high roll to succeed in this, plus a bribe or something. Or, Devil's Bargain, the guard agrees with you, but she wants to come with you on your rest of your quest in the castle to make sure you don't murder any more guards. And that's definitely not ideal, right? But they still get to retain their stealth. So, it's giving players that choice. What do we do, at this sticky situation? And the cool thing about situations like this is when the characters' true personalities come out. What would my character do in this situation? Would they just lure the guard round a corner and cut their throat? Would they honour their word and make sure they didn't harm any guards? Would they magic them to sleep or something and put them in a broom cupboard? Would they wait until the guard betrays them or something like that? So a Devil's Bargain, to summarise, is you saying to the players, you don't have to roll for this, but you have to accept this narrative device that I am putting on you to make it harder. So my third and final tip for failing up is don't roll the same test twice. Roll to reduce consequences. So there should always be consequences for failure. So going back to the example of the guard in the castle, you failed your stealth check, you failed your persuasion check. The guard is now running and starting to shout. If the player asks, I want to roll persuasion again or intimidation, it's like, no, sorry, it's too late. The guard is not willing to listen to anything you say. She's running. So then the player has to roll something else. They have to roll maybe to shoot the guard with a bow, or maybe to run and grapple, or use some sort of spell. Either way, the second roll should be to mitigate the consequences of the first failure. So just because they failed the persuasion check doesn't mean that the whole castle is going to be awake in minutes. You can let the player roll to mitigate that consequence, to make sure that the damage is minimalized. If the character is a really good bowman or wizard, then let them use that to try and fix their own mistakes, right? Or let another player try and do that as well. You know, maybe the character is persuading the guard because they don't want to harm them, but maybe your chaotic neutral rogue is like, oh, you know, it's too late now. We just had to silence it. That's all we could do. And then depending on the roll, how good it was or how bad it was, that's how much the consequences were mitigated. So maybe a roll of 18 means that you managed to get your bow out and shoot an arrow really, really fast. Or the guard managed to fall before she could shout too much or alert too many rooms. Maybe only a couple of guards come out of a side door and that's it. Or maybe some guards shout out to see what the commotion is, and then the players have to now also deal with those guards. I mean, either way, like, it's as I said, it's all about, you know, sticky situations, consequences, twists and turns. That's what's going to make the session exciting, right? If you do everything with a success or failure, black and white, it's not going to be very exciting. And as a new DM, one of the hardest things is dealing with unexpected failures. You know, in your head, you're like, okay, the players want to do this, roll to do that. Oh, you got a 1. Shit, that means something really bad has to happen, and I don't want something bad to happen because you need to do the thing to be able to move the story forward. But if you stop thinking about failure as in outright failure to do exactly what they wanted to do, try and make it more as in they failed to do that one specific thing how they wanted it to do, and then introduce a complication that they then have to deal with, and then they can overcome that. Or introduce a devil's bargain and let them have a complication afterwards. And that's my video on failing up. Yeah, as I said, I think it's a really cool way of keeping a session going, keeping the excitement up, and getting rid of that annoying feeling where, you know, your character, all players think their characters are really cool and they're really experts in what they do. You know, you should be letting them have that. You should be letting them do the thing they want to do, and then give them more problems to solve as well because of it. You know, don't make them outright failure should be a last resort. What do you think about failing up? Do you think it's a good thing? Do you think it's a bad thing? Are you going to try and maybe incorporate that into your games? You're going to talk to your DM and say, I want to fail up, you dick, not down. And as I said, pick up Blades in the Dark. Check out that Player's Best Practices page because it's really, really good. And the whole book's just really, really good as well. That's it from me this week. Don't forget to check out diceencounters.com for all my previous blogs. And I will see you next week for another video. Until then.